The chrome coffee pot crashed to the floor as Maya Santos dove behind the counter, her white apron catching the overhead fluorescent light for a split second before she disappeared from view. The gunman's voice echoed through Rosie's diner, harsh and commanding in accented English that made her blood freeze. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Everyone down! Now! This is not a robbery! Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed herself against the cool metal of the industrial refrigerator. Through the gap beneath the counter, she could see the scattered legs of her customers. Mrs. Henderson's sensible brown shoes, the construction worker's steel-toed boots, the businessman's polished Oxfords. All motionless, all terrified. The gunman continued his demands, but Maya's mind had shifted into a different gear entirely. Her fingers found the small scar on her left wrist, a habit she'd developed over the past 3 years whenever stress triggered memories she'd tried so hard to bury. The familiar texture grounded her, even as everything around her spiraled into chaos. She wasn't just Maya Santos, 26-year-old waitress at a truck stop diner in Bakersfield, California. She wasn't just the girl who remembered everyone's coffee order and always had a kind word for the lonely truckers passing through. Those people, her customers, her manager, even the gunman himself, they had no idea who she really was. Or rather, who she used to be. The tactical training kicked in before conscious thought could interfere. 8 seconds. That's how long it had taken her to disarm 3 insurgents in Kandahar, back when she was Staff Sergeant Maya Santos, 75th Ranger Regiment. Back when her hands were trained to kill, not to carry coffee and pie. The gunman's shadow moved past her hiding spot, and Maya's body went completely still. She could hear his breathing, slightly labored, probably from adrenaline. His footsteps suggested military-style boots, and his cadence indicated training, but also nervousness. This wasn't a seasoned operative. This was someone with just enough skill to be dangerous, and just enough fear to make fatal mistakes. Maya closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, centering herself the way her drill instructor had taught her a lifetime ago. When she opened them again, the mild-mannered waitress was gone. In her place was a weapon of precision, patience, and deadly intent. The clock on the wall ticked forward. In exactly 8 seconds, everything would change. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, I want to take a moment to thank you for watching. Creating and narrating these detailed, novel-length stories takes tremendous time and research to bring you the most engaging content possible. We're embarking on a journey of nearly 50,000 words together. That's a full novella. If you're already hooked by what you've heard, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this story with someone who would enjoy it, and subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest stories. This is going to be an epic adventure, so get comfortable and let's continue with this remarkable tale. The morning had started like any other Tuesday at Rosie's diner. Maya arrived at 5:30 a.m., just as the first hints of dawn painted the desert sky in shades of coral and gold. The parking lot was nearly empty except for Big Jim's 18-wheeler and the rusted pickup truck that belonged to their cook, Rodriguez. She loved these quiet moments before the breakfast rush, when the only sounds were the distant hum of the interstate and the gentle whistle of wind through the Joshua trees. Rosie's diner sat at the intersection of Highway 58 and a smaller state route that led to the oil fields. It was the kind of place that existed solely because travelers needed somewhere to stop. Truckers hauling freight to Los Angeles, families driving cross-country, oil workers heading to and from their shifts. The building itself was a relic from the 1950s, all chrome and red vinyl, with a neon sign that flickered intermittently and a jukebox that played country classics from decades past. Maya pushed through the front door, the familiar chime announcing her arrival. The scent of bacon grease and coffee grounds welcomed her like an old friend. This place had been her sanctuary for 3 years now, ever since she'd left the army, and desperately needed somewhere to disappear. "Morning, sunshine," Rodriguez called from behind the grill, his weathered face creasing into a smile. At 62, he'd been working at Rosie's longer than anyone, and he treated Maya like the daughter he'd never had. "Coffee's fresh, and I've got biscuits in the oven." "You're an angel, Rodriguez." Maya tied her apron around her waist and pulled her dark hair back into a practical ponytail. She'd learned to keep it simple at Rosie's. No elaborate hairstyles, minimal makeup, Nothing that would slow her down during the busy hours. The first customers began trickling in around 6 o'clock. Maya had memorized their patterns over the years. Big Jim liked his eggs over easy with wheat toast and black coffee. Mrs. Henderson, who worked at the elementary school, always ordered oatmeal with fruit and herbal tea. The construction crew from the highway project wanted everything fast and filling: pancakes, bacon, hash browns, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Maya moved through her morning routine with practiced efficiency: pour coffee, take orders, deliver plates, clear tables, smile, and make small talk. It was rhythmic, almost meditative. Her customers saw exactly what she wanted them to see: a friendly, competent waitress who remembered their names and preferences, who asked about their families and genuinely cared about their answers. None of them suspected that she could field strip an M4 carbine blindfolded, or that she'd once led a team of rangers through hostile territory in Afghanistan. None of them knew about the classified missions, the Bronze Star with Valor device, or the reasons she'd left the military with an honorable discharge and a folder full of commendations she never looked at anymore. That was exactly how she wanted it. Around 10 a.m., during the lull between breakfast and lunch, Maya was wiping down tables when she noticed the black sedan parked across the street. It had been there for 20 minutes, engine running, windows tinted dark enough to obscure the occupants. In Bakersfield, that kind of vehicle usually meant one of three things: federal agents, drug dealers, or someone lost and checking their GPS. Something about the sedan made her uneasy, though she couldn't pinpoint why. Call it instinct, call it paranoia. But 3 years of civilian life hadn't dulled her ability to sense when something was off. The car's position gave its occupants a clear view of the diner's entrance and exit. The license plate was too far away to read clearly, but it didn't look local. "Hey, Maya," called Tommy Morrison from booth 3. He was a regular, a long-haul trucker who usually passed through on Tuesdays. "Could I get a warm-up on this coffee?" Of course, hon. Maya forced herself to focus on the task at hand, filling Tommy's cup while keeping the sedan in her peripheral vision. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe it really was just someone checking directions or making phone calls. But as she walked back to the coffee station, she noticed something else that made her blood run cold. A second black sedan had appeared, this one parked behind the diner near the employee entrance. Same tinted windows, same sense of deliberate positioning. Maya's training kicked in automatically. She began conducting what her old squad leader would have called a tactical assessment. 2 vehicles, coordinated positioning, professional appearance. Either someone was conducting surveillance, or they were preparing for something more active. She moved toward the kitchen, her steps casual and unhurried. "Rodriguez, I'm going to grab some supplies from the storage room," she said, loud enough for anyone listening to hear. But instead of heading to storage, she slipped through the back door into the alley. The second sedan was there, just as she'd suspected. Through the windshield, she could make out 2 figures in the front seats. The driver was talking on a radio or phone, his gestures animated. The passenger was watching the diner's back entrance, watching for her, she realized with a chill. Maya ducked back inside before they could spot her. Her mind raced through possibilities. Federal agents wouldn't need this level of surveillance for a simple interview. Local police would have just walked in the front door. Drug enforcement would have brought more vehicles and probably some kind of tactical support. That left the possibility she'd been dreading for 3 years. Someone from her past had found her. She thought about the classified operations she'd been involved in during her final deployment, the high-value targets her team had captured or eliminated, the intelligence they'd gathered, the enemies who might hold grudges. When she'd left the service, her commanding officer had assured her that her new identity was solid, that the Witness Protection Program had successfully buried Staff Sergeant Maya Santos. Apparently, they'd been wrong. Maya returned to the dining room, forcing herself to maintain her normal routine while her mind worked through contingencies. She had maybe 10 minutes before whoever was in those cars made their move. She needed to get her customers to safety without causing panic, and she needed to do it in a way that wouldn't put them in more danger. "Everything okay, dear?" Mrs. Henderson looked up from her crossword puzzle with concerned eyes. "You seem a little flustered." "I'm fine, Mrs. Henderson, just thinking about inventory." Maya managed a smile, but her eyes were already scanning the diner for defensive positions and escape routes. The kitchen had a back exit, but it was covered by the second sedan. The front door was the obvious choice, but it would be expected. The windows were too small for most adults to fit through quickly. She was trapped, and whoever had found her knew it. Maya glanced at the clock above the register. 10:17 a.m. In her experience, this was when things usually went sideways, during the quiet moments when guard was down and witnesses were minimal. Only 7 customers in the diner right now, plus Rodriguez in the kitchen. The front door chimed, and Maya's heart stopped. 3 men entered, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that screamed military training. They were dressed casually, jeans, work shirts, baseball caps. But their eyes swept the room with tactical awareness. The lead man was tall and lean, with a close-cropped beard and eyes like winter ice. His companions flanked him naturally, creating overlapping fields of observation and fire. Maya recognized the formation. She'd used it herself countless times in hostile territory. The bearded man approached the counter, his smile friendly and disarming. "Good morning. Could we get a table for 3? "Of course," Maya replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Right this way." She led them to booth 5, near the back corner. It was a tactically sound choice from their perspective. Clear sight lines to both entrances, solid wall at their backs, close to the kitchen exit. They weren't amateurs. As she handed out menus, the bearded man looked directly into her eyes. "Thank you, Maya," he said quietly. "It's good to see you again." Maya's blood turned to ice. She didn't recognize his face, but the way he said her name, with familiarity and something that might have been regret, told her everything she needed to know. These weren't federal agents or local law enforcement. These were operators, probably private contractors, and they'd been sent to collect her. The question was, collect her for what? "I'll give you a few minutes to look over the menu," she said, backing away slowly. Her mind was already shifting into combat mode, cataloging weapons and obstacles. The coffee pot could be a projectile. The butter knives weren't much, but they were better than nothing. Rodriguez kept a baseball bat near the grill for dealing with unruly customers. The bearded man nodded. "Don't go far, Maya. We have a lot to discuss." Maya walked back toward the counter, her movements calm and measured. But inside, every instinct was screaming. She had perhaps 2 minutes before they made their move, maybe less. The other customers were oblivious to the danger, continuing their breakfasts and conversations as if nothing had changed. She thought about the emergency procedures she'd drilled into herself during those first paranoid months after leaving the army. The go bag hidden in her apartment. The fake identification papers. The emergency cash. All useless now, because she'd gotten comfortable. She'd started to believe that Maya Santos, the waitress, was real, that Staff Sergeant Santos was just a memory. She'd made the cardinal mistake of operators everywhere. She'd stopped watching her 6. Now, as she poured coffee with steady hands and smiled at customers who had no idea they were sitting in a potential war zone, Maya Santos prepared to become someone she'd hoped never to be again. The woman who could kill in 8 seconds. "Rodriguez," Maya called softly as she passed the kitchen, "we might have a problem." The old cook looked up from the grill, immediately picking up on the tension in her voice. In his younger days, Rodriguez had done 2 tours in Vietnam, and he still had the instincts of a soldier. His eyes flicked toward the dining room, taking in the 3 new customers who sat too straight and scanned too often. "How bad?" he whispered. "Federal agents, private contractors, or worse, they know who I am." Maya grabbed a fresh pot of coffee, using it as cover for their conversation. "If things go sideways, get everyone out through the back and call 911. Rodriguez nodded grimly. "What about you?" "I'll handle it." Maya's voice carried a certainty that surprised even her. For 3 years, she'd buried Staff Sergeant Santos beneath layers of civilian normalcy. But faced with immediate danger, the soldier emerged as naturally as breathing. She walked back into the dining room, coffee pot in hand, and began making rounds. To the casual observer, she was simply doing her job. But she was actually conducting reconnaissance, getting closer to the 3 men while appearing non-threatening. "More coffee, gentlemen?" she asked, approaching their table. The bearded leader looked up with that same cold smile. "Actually, Maya, we'd prefer to talk. Privately." "I'm working right now. Maybe you could come back during my break?" She kept her tone light, conversational, but her eyes were memorizing details. The bulge under the leader's left armpit suggested a shoulder holster. His companions were similarly armed, and all three wore earpieces barely visible beneath their hair. "I'm afraid this can't wait," the man's voice hardened slightly. "There are people who need to speak with you about your time in Afghanistan. Specifically, about Operation Desert Ghost." Maya's hand tightened imperceptibly on the coffee pot. Operation Desert Ghost had been classified at the highest levels, known only to her immediate team and a handful of intelligence officials. The fact that these men knew about it meant either they had government clearance or someone with clearance had hired them. Neither possibility was comforting. "I'm sorry, but I think you have me confused with someone else," she said, maintaining her cover. "I've never been to Afghanistan. I'm just a waitress." The leader chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "Staff Sergeant Maya Elena Santos, Service Number 123456789, 75th Ranger Regiment, 2nd Battalion. 3 deployments: Bronze Star with Valor Device, Purple Heart, Combat Action Badge. Honorably discharged 3 years ago and disappeared into the civilian population." He leaned forward slightly. "Should I continue?" Maya's mind raced. These men had access to her complete military record, which should have been sealed along with her new identity. Someone very high up the food chain had burned her cover, and that meant her situation was far worse than she'd initially thought. "Like I said, you have the wrong person." Maya turned to walk away, but the leader's next words stopped her cold. "We also know about the flash drive, Maya. The one you took from Colonel Brennan's safe before you disappeared." Maya's blood ran cold. She'd hoped that particular secret would stay buried forever. The flash drive contained evidence of war crimes committed by American forces, specifically the systematic execution of prisoners and the theft of millions in reconstruction funds. She'd taken it as insurance, never intending to use it unless someone tried to silence her permanently. Apparently that time had come. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Of course you do." The leader stood up, his movements fluid and controlled. "And now you're going to come with us so we can discuss it properly." The other customers were starting to notice the tension. Tommy Morrison looked up from his newspaper, sensing something was wrong. Mrs. Henderson had stopped working on her crossword and was watching with worried eyes. Maya realized she had reached the point of no return. These men weren't going to leave without her, and they clearly didn't care about witnesses. In fact, the presence of innocent civilians might work in their favor. Maya wouldn't risk a firefight with bystanders in the line of fire. Or so they thought. "Gentlemen," she said loudly enough for everyone in the diner to hear, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're disturbing my other customers." The leader's smile grew colder. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen, Maya. You see, we've been authorized to use any means necessary to bring you in for questioning." He reached into his jacket, and Maya saw the flash of metal. Gun. Her training took over instantaneously. Maya hurled the coffee pot at the leader's head while simultaneously diving toward Mrs. Henderson's booth. The elderly woman screamed as Maya tackled her to the floor, using the heavy wooden table as cover from the gunfire that would surely follow. But instead of bullets, Maya heard something far worse. "Everyone freeze! This is a federal operation!" Maya risked a glance over the table and saw all 3 men had drawn weapons, not just handguns, but compact submachine guns that had been concealed under their loose clothing. The leader was wiping coffee from his face, his expression murderous. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced in a calm, professional voice, "my name is Agent Peterson, and we're with a classified federal task force. We need everyone to remain calm and follow our instructions exactly." It was a lie, Maya knew. Real federal agents didn't conduct operations like this in civilian locations without backup and proper protocols. But her customers didn't know that. They saw official-looking credentials and government-style authority, and they believed what they were told to believe. "Maya Santos," Peterson continued, his weapon trained on her hiding spot. "You need to surrender yourself immediately. Any resistance will be considered an act of terrorism against the United States government." Maya's mind worked frantically. Peterson was smart. By framing this as a federal operation, he'd gained the compliance of the witnesses and painted Maya as the criminal. If she fought back, she'd be the one attacking federal agents in front of a diner full of innocent people. But Maya had spent enough time in covert operations to recognize a black op when she saw one. These men had no official authorization. They were freelancers, probably hired by whoever had the most to lose if the contents of that flash drive ever saw daylight. Which meant they had no intention of leaving witnesses. Maya's blood chilled as she realized the true scope of the situation. This wasn't just about capturing her anymore. This was about eliminating everyone who could identify Peterson and his team. She had to act, and she had to act now. "Please don't hurt anyone," she called out, playing for time while she positioned herself for what would come next. "I'll cooperate. Just let these people go first." Peterson laughed. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Maya. You see, this operation was classified, and civilians aren't authorized to know about it." The implications of his words hit everyone in the diner simultaneously. Mrs. Henderson whimpered. Tommy Morrison started to stand up, then thought better of it. Rodriguez had gone completely still behind the grill. Maya closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, centering herself the way she'd been taught in ranger school. When she opened them again, the mild-mannered waitress was gone completely. In her place was a weapon of surgical precision and absolutely lethal intent. Peterson made his fatal mistake when he looked away from Maya's position to address his companions. 8 seconds later, everything changed forever. Maya moved with the fluid precision of water finding its path. In the first second, she was airborne, launching herself from behind Mrs. Henderson's table in a trajectory calculated to bring her into contact with Peterson before he could swing his weapon around. In the second second, she connected with Peterson's gun arm, her left hand clamping down on his wrist, while her right drove an elbow strike into his solar plexus. The submachine gun discharged into the ceiling, raining plaster dust down on the terrified customers. In the third second, Maya used Peterson's forward momentum against him, pivoting on her left foot to throw him over her hip in a perfect judo throw. His body crashed into the counter with enough force to shatter the glass display case. In the fourth second, she had stripped the weapon from his nerveless fingers and was already rotating to engage the second threat. The man to Peterson's left was bringing his gun to bear, but Maya was faster. In the fifth second, a 3-round burst from Peterson's submachine gun caught the second gunman's center mass, dropping him instantly. Maya was already moving, using the booth dividers as cover while she tracked the third target. In the sixth second, she spotted him crouched near the kitchen entrance, trying to get a clean shot. Maya went low, sliding across the floor on her hip, while firing controlled bursts that forced him to duck behind the pie case. In the seventh second, she reached his position and drove the stock of the submachine gun into his knee, shattering it with an audible crack. As he fell, Maya relieved him of his weapon with practiced efficiency. In the eighth second, she was standing over 3 neutralized threats, weapons trained on Peterson, who was struggling to breathe through his damaged ribs. The entire engagement had lasted 8 seconds. The only sounds in the diner were the whimpering of terrified customers and the groaning of wounded men. Maya's breathing was steady, controlled. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to command in combat situations. "Rodriguez, call 911 now. Tell them we have multiple gunshot wounds, and request immediate medical assistance and law enforcement response." She kept her eyes and weapons focused on Peterson. "Everyone else, stay down and stay calm. The danger is over." Tommy Morrison was staring at her with amazement and something approaching awe. "Jesus Christ, Maya! What the hell was that?" Maya didn't answer immediately. She was conducting a tactical assessment of the situation, her training taking precedence over social niceties. Peterson was conscious but injured. The second gunman was down and not moving, possibly dead. The third was writhing on the floor, clutching his shattered knee. "That," she said finally, "was 8 seconds. Mrs. Henderson emerged from behind her table, her face pale but determined. "Dear, are you all right? You're not hurt?" Maya did a quick self-assessment. No injuries, no immediate threats, weapons secured. "I'm fine, Mrs. Henderson. But I need everyone to listen carefully. These men are not federal agents. They're private contractors who were sent to kidnap me and probably kill all of you as witnesses." The implications of her words sent a fresh wave of fear through the diner. Tommy Morrison stood up slowly, his hands raised. "Maya, who the hell are you?" Maya looked at him, then at Mrs. Henderson, then at Rodriguez, who had finished his 911 call and was watching her with knowing eyes. These people had been her friends, her chosen family for 3 years. They deserved the truth, even if it destroyed the life she'd built here. My name is Staff Sergeant Maya Elena Santos, United States Army Rangers. 3 years ago, I discovered evidence of war crimes committed by American forces in Afghanistan. I took that evidence and disappeared because I knew that certain people would kill to keep it secret. She gestured at Peterson with the barrel of her weapon. I was right. Peterson coughed, blood flecking his lips. You have no idea what you've done, he wheezed. They'll send more people, better people. Let them come, Maya said coldly. I've been running for 3 years. I'm done running. The sound of sirens approached in the distance. Maya knew she had perhaps 5 minutes before law enforcement arrived, and she needed to use that time wisely. Peterson and his team had found her, which meant her cover was blown completely. She couldn't go back to being Maya the waitress. That life was over. But maybe, just maybe, she could use this situation to finally bring down the people who had forced her into hiding. Peterson, she said, kneeling beside him but keeping the weapon trained on his chest. Who sent you? Who's so afraid of what I know that they'd risk a public operation like this? Peterson's eyes held malice and pain in equal measure. Go to hell. Maya's expression didn't change. Wrong answer. She pressed the barrel of the submachine gun against his wounded ribs, causing him to cry out in agony. Let me explain something to you, Peterson. I spent 3 years in Afghanistan fighting people who thought torture and intimidation were acceptable tactics. I learned things from them, things I hoped I'd never have to use. The sirens were getting closer, maybe 3 minutes now. The people I'm protecting myself from, Maya continued, they've murdered innocent civilians to cover up their crimes. They've stolen millions of dollars meant to rebuild a war-torn country. They've dishonored the uniform I wore with pride for 8 years. Her voice grew colder. So understand that I have absolutely no qualms about doing whatever it takes to stop them. Peterson stared into her eyes and saw something that made him flinch. This wasn't the desperate waitress he'd expected to capture. This was a professional soldier who had made a decision about how far she was willing to go. Colonel Marcus Webb, he gasped. Department of Defense, Special Projects Division. He's the one. He's running the whole operation. Maya nodded. She'd suspected as much. Webb had been Peterson's commanding officer during her final deployment, and he'd had access to the intelligence that had led to Operation Desert Ghost. If anyone had the means and motive to cover up war crimes, it would be him. Who else? She demanded. Contractor. Blackwater affiliate. They call themselves Cerberus Solutions. Peterson's breathing was becoming more labored. Webb hired them to clean up loose ends. The sirens were very close now. Maya could see flashing lights through the windows. Thank you, Peterson. You've been very helpful. Maya stood up, ejected the magazines from both submachine guns, and cleared the chambers. She placed all the weapons on the counter, well away from the wounded men. When the first police officers burst through the door, weapons drawn and shouting commands, they found Maya Santos standing in the center of the diner with her hands raised, surrounded by the aftermath of a battle that had lasted exactly 8 seconds. The Kern County Sheriff's Department had cordoned off Rosie's diner with enough yellow tape to wrap a city block. Detective Sarah Martinez stood in the parking lot, reviewing her notes and trying to make sense of what had just happened. In her 15 years of law enforcement, she'd never encountered a situation quite like this. Maya Santos sat in the back of an ambulance, refusing medical treatment while giving her statement to Detective Rodriguez, no relation to the diner's cook, though the coincidence had provided a moment of levity in an otherwise grim afternoon. She was calm, articulate, and completely forthcoming about her military background and the reasons she believed she'd been targeted. So you're telling me, Detective Martinez said, approaching the ambulance, that you single-handedly disarmed 3 armed men in less than 10 seconds? Maya looked up at her with steady brown eyes. 8 seconds, actually. And they weren't just armed, they were trained professionals with automatic weapons. Detective Martinez glanced at her notes. The witness statements were consistent and remarkable. Tommy Morrison, a man not given to exaggeration, had described Maya's actions as like something out of a movie, except faster and scarier. Mrs. Henderson, still shaken but coherent, had insisted that Maya had saved all their lives. The ballistics team is still processing the scene, Martinez continued, but preliminary findings suggest that you fired no more than 6 rounds, and all of them were tactically sound. No collateral damage, no unnecessary force. Maya nodded. I was trained to use minimum necessary force to neutralize threats. These men were planning to kill everyone in that diner. I stopped them from doing that. The detective studied Maya's face, looking for signs of deception or stress. What she saw instead was the calm professionalism of someone accustomed to violence and its aftermath. Maya Santos might have been working as a waitress for 3 years, but she was still very much a soldier. The man you identified as Peterson is in surgery right now, Martinez said. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, concussion. The second gunman died at the scene, single gunshot wound to the heart. The third is stable but will likely need surgery to repair his knee. I'm sorry someone died, Maya said, and she seemed to mean it. But they made their choice when they decided to threaten innocent people. Martinez made another note. Maya's psychological profile was consistent with that of a combat veteran. Professional detachment from violence, clear moral boundaries, but absolutely no hesitation when those boundaries were crossed. Miss Santos, I need to ask you about the allegations these men made, specifically about classified material you may have taken from the military. Maya was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. She could continue denying everything, but the events at the diner had already blown her cover completely. Peterson's employers would send more people, and next time they might not be concerned about keeping things quiet. Detective Martinez, what I'm about to tell you is going to put you in a very dangerous position. Are you sure you want to hear it? The detective's eyebrows rose. Miss Santos, I'm investigating an incident where 3 armed men attempted to kidnap you from a public place. If there's relevant information, I need to know about it. Maya took a deep breath. 3 years ago, during my final deployment in Afghanistan, I discovered evidence of systematic war crimes being committed by American forces. Specifically, the execution of prisoners and the theft of reconstruction funds. When I tried to report it through proper channels, I was told to forget what I'd seen. She paused, watching Martinez's face carefully. The detective was listening intently, her expression neutral but alert. Instead of forgetting, I gathered evidence. Documents, photographs, financial records. I compiled it all on a flash drive and submitted it to the Inspector General's office, expecting a proper investigation. Maya's voice hardened. What I got instead was a transfer to a non-combat position, and strong suggestions that I should consider early retirement for the good of my health. Martinez made several notes. And did you retire? I took an honorable discharge and disappeared into civilian life. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Maya gestured toward the diner. Today proves that someone is still very concerned about what I know. Where is this flash drive now? Maya looked directly into Martinez's eyes. Hidden somewhere safe. And before you ask, I have multiple copies in multiple locations, with instructions for their release if anything happens to me. Detective Martinez felt a chill run down her spine. If Maya's allegations were true, then this incident was far more serious than a simple kidnapping attempt. This was a conspiracy involving high-ranking military officials and private contractors, with implications that could reach the highest levels of government. Miss Santos, I need you to understand something. If what you're telling me is accurate, then you and everyone who knows about this are in serious danger. These people have already tried once to silence you. I know, Maya said quietly. That's why I'm done hiding. Running didn't work. Maybe it's time to fight back. Martinez closed her notebook. I'm going to need to turn this over to federal authorities, the FBI, probably Homeland Security as well. Detective, with all due respect, how do you know which federal authorities you can trust? If Colonel Webb has the resources to hire private contractors for illegal operations, he probably has contacts throughout the intelligence community. It was a sobering thought. Martinez had always operated under the assumption that law enforcement agencies were inherently trustworthy, that corruption was the exception rather than the rule. But Maya's situation suggested otherwise. What do you suggest? Martinez asked. Maya considered the question. Give me 24 hours. Let me reach out to some contacts I trust. People who can help me get this information to the right authorities without it being buried or suppressed. I can't just let you walk away from a crime scene, Miss Santos. Then don't. Put me in protective custody, but do it quietly. And don't trust anyone outside your immediate chain of command. Maya's expression was deadly serious. Detective, these people killed 3 civilians in Afghanistan to cover up their crimes. They won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who gets in their way. including local law enforcement. Martinez felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She'd become involved in something far beyond the scope of a typical criminal investigation. But Maya was right about one thing. If she handled this wrong, people were going to die. "There's something else," Maya said. "Peterson mentioned that his employers have been tracking me for some time. That means they know about this place, these people. Everyone who was in that diner today is now a potential target." The implications hit Martinez like a physical blow. Mrs. Henderson, Tommy Morrison, Rodriguez the cook, all of them were now witnesses to a classified operation. In the world Maya was describing, witnesses were liabilities to be eliminated. "What do you recommend?" Martinez asked. "Protective custody for everyone who was present during the incident, at least until we can neutralize the threat or get the evidence into the right hands." Maya stood up from the ambulance, her movements fluid and controlled. "And detective? You might want to consider that you're now a target too. Just by being here, by knowing what you know, you've become part of this." Martinez looked around the crime scene with new eyes. The flashing lights, the yellow tape, the gathered law enforcement officers, all of it suddenly seemed inadequate against the kind of threat Maya was describing. "Miss Santos, if I arrange protective custody, will you cooperate fully with our investigation?" Quote. Maya extended her hand. "Detective, I've been waiting 3 years for someone I could trust with this information. You have my complete cooperation." As they shook hands, Martinez couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into a war zone. The only question was whether they could win it before more people died. FBI Special Agent Rebecca Chen had been having a perfectly ordinary Tuesday until her secure phone rang at 3:47 p.m. She was reviewing case files in her San Francisco office, preparing for a routine meeting with federal prosecutors, when the call came in from Detective Martinez in Bakersfield. "Agent Chen, I have a situation that requires immediate federal attention. 3 armed men attempted to kidnap a witness from a public location, claiming to be federal agents. The witness neutralized all 3 attackers and is making allegations of military war crimes and government cover-ups." Chen had been with the Bureau for 12 years, and she'd learned to recognize the calls that would change everything. This was one of them. "Detective Martinez, I'm going to need you to repeat that entire statement, slowly and with complete accuracy." As Martinez detailed the events at Rosie's diner, Chen made careful notes and felt her blood pressure rising. If even half of what she was hearing was true, this case had the potential to become a major scandal involving multiple federal agencies. "The witness, Maya Santos, is claiming to have evidence of war crimes committed by American forces in Afghanistan. She says she's been in hiding for 3 years because someone tried to silence her when she attempted to report it." Chen rubbed her temples. "Cases involving military misconduct required delicate handling and coordination with multiple agencies. The chain of command alone could be a nightmare, especially if the allegations reached high-ranking officials. Detective, I need you to secure the scene completely. No one else gets access without my direct authorization. I'm driving down there now with a team, and we should be there within 4 hours." "Agent Chen, there's something else. The witness believes that everyone present during the incident is now at risk. She's requesting protective custody for all witnesses." That gave Chen pause. Protective custody was expensive and resource-intensive, not something to be undertaken lightly. But if Maya Santos was right about the scope of the conspiracy against her, then the request was entirely reasonable. "Granted," Chen said. "Full protection for all witnesses, until we can assess the threat level. And, detective, don't trust anyone outside your immediate chain of command until I get there." After ending the call, Chen stared at her desk for a long moment. She had a choice to make. She could handle this by the book, filing reports and following proper channels, which would take weeks and might result in the evidence being buried or the witnesses being silenced. Or she could treat this as an active threat and move aggressively to protect both the witnesses and the integrity of the investigation. Chen reached for her secure phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in 2 years. "Marcus, it's Rebecca Chen. I need a favor, and I need it quietly." Marcus Webb, deputy director of the FBI's Criminal Investigative Division, had been Chen's mentor when she was a junior agent. He was also one of the few people in the bureau she trusted completely. "Rebecca, what's going on?" Chen outlined the situation, watching Webb's expression grow increasingly grave as she spoke. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Rebecca, this is exactly the kind of case that destroys careers. Are you sure you want to take it on?" "Marcus, if this woman is telling the truth, then we have American military personnel committing war crimes and using private contractors to silence witnesses. We don't have a choice." Webb nodded slowly. "All right. I'll give you whatever resources you need, but I want this kept compartmentalized. Need to know basis only until we understand the scope of what we're dealing with." Chen felt a surge of relief. With Webb's backing, she could move quickly and decisively without worrying about bureaucratic obstacles. "I'll need a team of agents I can trust completely, people who won't leak information or get pressure from outside sources." "I'll handpick them myself," Webb promised. "What else?" "Secure communications, safe houses for the witnesses, and a direct line to the Attorney General's office if this goes as high as I think it might." Webb made notes on his legal pad. "Done. Rebecca, be careful with this one. If there really is a conspiracy involving high-ranking military officials, they'll have resources and connections we can't match." After ending the call, Chen began assembling her team. She needed agents with experience in organized crime, military liaisons, and financial investigations. She also needed people who could be trusted to follow orders without asking too many questions, at least initially. Her first call was to Agent David Park, a former Army Ranger who had joined the Bureau after completing 2 tours in Iraq. If anyone could understand Maya Santos's mindset and validate her claims, it would be Park. "David, I need you on a plane to Bakersfield within the hour. Pack for an extended operation, and don't tell anyone where you're going." Her second call was to Agent Jennifer Walsh, a financial crimes specialist who had spent 5 years tracking money laundering operations for terrorist organizations. If Maya's allegations involved stolen reconstruction funds, Walsh would be able to follow the money trail. Her third call was to Agent Robert Torres, a former police detective who specialized in witness protection and threat assessment. If Maya and the other witnesses were really in danger, Torres would be able to design a security plan that could keep them alive. As her team prepared to deploy, Chen received another call on her secure line. This one was from a number she didn't recognize. "Agent Chen, my name is Colonel James Morrison, Army Criminal Investigation Command. I understand you're investigating an incident involving a former Army Ranger named Maya Santos." Chen felt her blood run cold. How had CID learned about the investigation so quickly? The incident had occurred less than 4 hours ago, and she'd specifically requested that information be compartmentalized. "Colonel Morrison, I'm not at liberty to discuss ongoing investigations." "Agent Chen, I need you to understand that Maya Santos is a person of interest in several ongoing military investigations. She stole classified material when she left the service, and she may be attempting to sell that material to foreign nationals." Chen gripped the phone tighter. Morrison was trying to discredit Maya before the FBI investigation could even begin. That suggested either he was part of the conspiracy Maya had described, or he was being manipulated by people who were. "Colonel, if you have evidence of criminal activity by Miss Santos, I'd be happy to review it through proper channels. But right now, she's a witness in a federal investigation, and she's under FBI protection. Agent Chen, I'm trying to help you avoid a serious mistake. Maya Santos is not the victim she's pretending to be. She's a traitor who stole classified information and has been evading military justice for 3 years." Chen made a decision that would define the rest of the investigation. "Colonel Morrison, if you want to pursue charges against Miss Santos, you'll need to coordinate with the Department of Justice and follow proper extradition procedures. Until then, she remains under FBI protection as a federal witness." She hung up before Morrison could respond. Chen sat back in her chair, her mind racing. Morrison's call confirmed her worst fears about this case. Someone with significant influence was already trying to control the narrative and discredit Maya Santos. That suggested the conspiracy was real, and it reached higher into the military hierarchy than she'd initially believed. Her secure phone rang again. This time, it was Detective Martinez. "Agent Chen, we have a problem. 3 more vehicles just arrived at the diner scene. They're claiming to be federal agents, but they're not showing proper identification, and they're demanding immediate access to Maya Santos." Chen felt her heart rate spike. "Detective, do not allow them access to the witness under any circumstances. I'm authorizing you to use any force necessary to protect Ms. Santos and the other witnesses." "Understood." But Agent Chen, these people are well armed, and they're acting like they have authority to override local law enforcement. They don't. Not unless they can produce proper federal warrants and identification. Hold your position, Detective. My team will be there within 3 hours. Chen ended the call and immediately dialed her team leaders. The situation was escalating faster than she'd anticipated, and Maya Santos was running out of time. This is Agent Chen. We have a code red situation in Bakersfield. All units proceed immediately with full tactical support. We have federal witnesses under threat from unknown hostiles claiming government authority. As she grabbed her service weapon and tactical vest, Chen realized that Maya Santos had been right about one thing. This was no longer just an investigation. This was a war, and the first battle was about to begin. Maya Santos crouched behind the overturned table in the Kern County Sheriff's Department break room, listening to the sound of footsteps in the corridor outside. 45 minutes ago, she'd been giving her statement to Detective Martinez in the relative safety of the police station. Now the building was under siege by men claiming to be federal agents, and Maya was beginning to think that nowhere was truly safe. "How many?" she whispered to Detective Rodriguez, who was positioned near the door with his service weapon drawn. "At least 6 that we've seen, maybe more outside. They've got the building surrounded." Rodriguez's voice was tense, but controlled. "They're claiming to have a federal warrant for your arrest, but something doesn't smell right about their paperwork." Maya wasn't surprised. Peterson's employers were obviously willing to go to any lengths to capture her, including impersonating federal agents and assaulting a police station. The fact that they were moving so quickly suggested desperation. They needed to silence her before she could share what she knew with the right people. "Detective Martinez," Maya said into the radio Rodriguez had given her, "where are you right now?" "Barricaded in the sheriff's office with Mrs. Henderson and Tommy Morrison. We've got the safe room sealed, but I don't know how long we can hold this position." Maya closed her eyes and forced herself to think tactically. The attackers had the building surrounded, which meant traditional escape routes were blocked. But they'd made a critical mistake by attacking a police station. It meant that backup would be coming, and they couldn't maintain their federal agent cover story for long. "Detective Rodriguez, what's your radio protocol for requesting emergency assistance?" "Channel 9 for countywide backup, Channel 7 for state police." Rodriguez looked at her with understanding. "But if these guys really are federal agents, backup might not help us." "They're not," Maya said with certainty. "Real federal agents don't conduct operations like this. They would have coordinated with local law enforcement and provided proper documentation in advance." A voice echoed through the building's PA system, speaking with calm authority. "This is Agent Wilson, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have the building surrounded. Maya Santos, you need to surrender yourself immediately for questioning regarding national security violations." Maya almost laughed. The voice belonged to Peterson. She recognized the slight accent and cadence. Either he'd recovered from his injuries remarkably quickly, or this was a recording he'd made before the operation began. "Rodriguez, does your department have body cameras?" "Sure, why?" "Turn yours on. Record everything that happens from this point forward. When this is over, people are going to need to see what really happened here." Rodriguez activated his body camera, the small red light indicating it was recording. "Done. Now what?" Maya was quiet for a moment, running through tactical options. The attackers wanted her alive. Otherwise, they would have simply used explosives or overwhelming force. That gave her a slight advantage, but only if she could exploit it correctly. "I need you to trust me, Detective. What I'm about to suggest is going to sound insane. Given what I've seen today, insane might be our best option." Maya outlined her plan quickly and quietly. Rodriguez listened with growing amazement, then shook his head. "Maya, that's not insane. That's suicidal." "Maybe, but it's also the only way to keep everyone else alive." Maya checked the magazine and the pistol Martinez had given her. 15 rounds, one in the chamber. "How long until FBI backup arrives?" Agent Chen said 3 hours, but that was 90 minutes ago. Maybe another hour and a half? Too long. Maya could hear the attackers moving through the building, systematically checking rooms and coordinating their search. They would reach the break room within minutes. "Detective, I need you to do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you. No questions, no hesitation. Can you do that?" Rodriguez looked into her eyes and saw the same cold determination he'd witnessed at the diner. This wasn't Maya the waitress asking. This was Staff Sergeant Santos, and she was preparing to go to war. Just tell me what you need. Maya moved to the window and peered through the blinds. 2 vehicles in the parking lot, probably 4 more men outside. The building's layout worked in her favor. Multiple exits, good sightlines, and plenty of cover. She'd fought in worse conditions. When I give the signal, you're going to announce over the PA system that I'm surrendering and coming out the front entrance. Give me 60 seconds, then make the announcement. What are you really going to do? Maya's smile was sharp and predatory. I'm going to remind these people why the Rangers have a reputation. She moved toward the back exit, her movements fluid and silent. Rodriguez watched her go with a mixture of admiration and terror. In the space of 8 hours, he'd seen Maya Santos transform from a mild-mannered waitress into one of the most dangerous people he'd ever encountered. Maya slipped out the back door and immediately went low, using the patrol cars as cover while she assessed the tactical situation. 2 men positioned at the rear of the building, both carrying automatic weapons and wearing tactical gear. Professional equipment, professional positioning, but they were focused on preventing escape rather than watching for counterattack. That was their mistake. Maya moved through the shadows like a ghost, using every piece of cover available. The first attacker never saw her coming. She rose behind him like smoke, one hand covering his mouth while the other applied pressure to his carotid artery. He was unconscious in seconds, and Maya had relieved him of his weapon and communications gear. The second attacker realized something was wrong when his partner failed to respond to a radio check. He turned toward Maya's position, weapon raised, but she was already moving. The engagement lasted 3 seconds. Maya's first shot took him center mass, dropping him instantly. Her second shot was insurance, ensuring he wouldn't be getting back up. She stripped him of his equipment and moved toward the front of the building. Through the radio she'd taken from the first attacker, Maya could hear the confusion and growing concern of the assault team. Team 2, respond. Team 2, what's your status? Maya keyed the radio and spoke in the first attacker's voice, which she'd had time to memorize during their brief encounter. Team 2 holding position. Possible movement in the south parking lot. It bought her 30 seconds while they investigated the false lead. 30 seconds to position herself where she could do the most damage. Rodriguez's voice came over the building's PA system. Attention, federal agents. Maya Santos has agreed to surrender. She will be exiting through the front entrance in 60 seconds with her hands visible. Maya smiled grimly. Rodriguez was a good cop. He'd given her exactly the diversion she needed. The front of the building had 4 attackers, all positioned to capture Maya as she emerged. They were focused on the main entrance, weapons ready, but not expecting resistance from behind. Maya had learned a long time ago that the key to asymmetric warfare was striking where the enemy felt safest. These men thought they had her cornered, thought they controlled the situation. They were about to learn otherwise. She moved into position behind their left flank, using the shadows and her stolen tactical gear to blend in with their formation. In the darkness and confusion, she looked like just another member of their team. The radio crackled. All units, target is approaching the front entrance. Remember, we need her alive. Maya keyed her stolen radio. Copy that. Target acquired. Then she opened fire. The engagement was brief and utterly one-sided. Maya had surprise, superior positioning, and the tactical advantage of knowing exactly who was an enemy. The attackers had numbers and firepower, but in close-quarters combat, Maya Santos was in her element. When the shooting stopped, 4 more men were down, and Maya was the only person standing in the parking lot. She collected their weapons and communications equipment, then spoke into the radio with her own voice. This is Staff Sergeant Maya Santos, United States Army Rangers. Your operation has failed. Surrender now, and you'll live to see trial. Continue this assault, and I'll kill every one of you. The response was immediate and predictable. Santos, this is Agent Wilson. You're surrounded and outnumbered. Surrender now, or we'll be forced to use lethal force. Maya almost laughed. She just demonstrated exactly how surrounded and outnumbered she was, and Wilson was still trying to maintain his cover story. Wilson, or Peterson, or whatever your real name is, Maya said into the radio, you have 60 seconds to evacuate this area before I start hunting you actively. Your choice. The radio went silent. Maya moved back toward the building, keeping to the shadows and maintaining overwatch of all approaches. She'd neutralized the immediate threat. But she knew this was far from over. Peterson's employers would send more people, better people, and next time they might not be concerned about keeping things quiet. But for now, the people under her protection were safe, and that would have to be enough. In the distance, Maya could hear the sound of approaching sirens. FBI backup was finally arriving, and she hoped Agent Chen would prove to be as trustworthy as Detective Martinez believed. Maya Santos had been running for 3 years. Now she was ready to make her stand. We're deep into this incredible story now, and I hope you're as captivated as I am by these unfolding events. The amount of effort that goes into researching, writing, and narrating these novel-length stories is immense. We're talking about creating content equivalent to a published book. But it's worth it to bring you stories that truly engage and transport you to another world. If you're enjoying this journey so far, please take a second to like this video and share it with friends who appreciate great storytelling. Your support means everything and helps us continue creating these detailed epic narratives. We still have so much more to discover together, so let's see how this situation unfolds. Agent Rebecca Chen arrived at the Kern County Sheriff's Department to find a war zone. The parking lot was littered with tactical gear and medical equipment, while paramedics worked on several wounded men who claimed to be federal agents. Local law enforcement had established a perimeter, but the confusion was evident on everyone's faces. Detective Martinez met Chen at the perimeter tape, her expression grim. "Agent Chen, we have a serious problem." Maya Santos just single-handedly neutralized an 8-man assault team that was attempting to storm our building. Chen stared at the scene, trying to process what she was seeing. These men attacked a police station? They claimed to have federal warrants for Santos's arrest, but their paperwork was fake and their tactics were completely inappropriate for a legitimate law enforcement operation. Martinez handed Chen a tablet with video footage. "This is from Detective Rodriguez's body camera. It shows everything that happened." Chen watched the footage with growing amazement and concern. Maya Santos moved through the engagement with professional precision, neutralizing threats with minimal force while protecting innocent people. But the implications were staggering. If these really were government contractors, then someone with significant resources was willing to assault a police station to capture one witness. "Where is Santos now?" Chen asked. "Secure location within the building. She's requesting a face-to-face meeting with you before she'll discuss the evidence she claims to have." Chen nodded. She'd expected as much. After what Santos had been through, she would be paranoid about trusting anyone, even legitimate federal agents. "What about the other witnesses?" "Safe. Santos insisted on maintaining protective details for all of them until this situation is resolved." Martinez paused. "Agent Chen, I've been a cop for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like what happened here today. Santos isn't just a trained soldier. She's something else entirely." Chen made her way into the building, noting the tactical positions Santos had used and the efficiency of her movements. Every shot had been precise. Every decision calculated to minimize collateral damage while maximizing effectiveness. This wasn't the work of someone acting in panic or desperation. This was the work of a professional who had been trained to operate in hostile territory. She found Maya Santos in the sheriff's conference room, sitting calmly at the table with her hands folded. Despite having just fought off an assault team, she looked composed and alert. Her eyes tracked Chen's movements with the wariness of someone accustomed to evaluating threats. "Agent Chen," Maya said, rising to shake hands, "thank you for coming. I hope you'll forgive the dramatic circumstances, but I needed to be certain you were who you claimed to be." Chen studied Maya's face, looking for signs of instability or deception. What she saw instead was the calm professionalism of someone accustomed to high-stress situations. "Miss Santos, I need you to understand that what happened here today has attracted attention at the highest levels of government. The Attorney General's office is demanding answers, and several agencies are claiming jurisdiction over this case." "Which agencies?" Maya asked sharply. "FBI, obviously, Army Criminal Investigation Command, Defense Intelligence Agency, even CIA is asking questions, though they claim it's just advisory." Maya's expression hardened. "Agent Chen, the more agencies that get involved, the more likely it becomes that information will reach the people who want me dead. I need your word that this investigation will be compartmentalized and that you'll personally verify the identity and clearance of anyone who gets access to what I know." Chen sat down across from Maya, her expression serious. "Miss Santos, I can promise you that I'll do everything in my power to protect both you and the integrity of this investigation. But I need you to understand that if your allegations are accurate, this case is going to attract attention, whether we want it to or not." Maya was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. "Agent Chen, before we proceed, I need to tell you something that might change your perspective on this entire situation." "I'm listening." Quote, "The evidence I have doesn't just show war crimes committed by American forces. It shows systematic corruption involving reconstruction contracts, weapons sales, and intelligence sharing with hostile foreign nationals." Maya's voice was steady, but Chen could see the weight of what she was revealing. "We're not talking about a few rogue soldiers. We're talking about a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of the Department of Defense and potentially other agencies." Chen felt her blood run cold. If Maya was telling the truth, then this case was exponentially more serious than she'd initially believed. How high does it go? High enough that someone was willing to hire private contractors to assault a police station in broad daylight. Maya leaned forward. "Agent Chen, the people behind this have unlimited resources and connections throughout the government. They've been planning to silence me for 3 years, and they're not going to stop until either they're in prison or I'm dead." Chen made several notes, her mind racing through the implications. A conspiracy involving high-ranking military officials would require investigation techniques and security measures far beyond what she'd initially planned. "Miss Santos, I need to ask you directly, do you have evidence that could substantiate these allegations in a court of law?" Maya reached into her jacket and withdrew a small device that looked like a standard USB drive. "Agent Chen, this contains copies of classified documents, financial records, photographs, and video footage that prove systematic war crimes and corruption involving American forces in Afghanistan. It also contains the names and service records of everyone involved, from enlisted personnel up to flag officers." Chen stared at the device, understanding that she was looking at potential evidence in what could become the largest military scandal in American history. "How did you obtain this material?" "Some of it I witnessed personally. Some I photographed or recorded during authorized intelligence-gathering operations. The financial records I obtained from my commanding officer's personal files when I realized he was involved in the corruption." "You broke into your commanding officer's files?" Maya's expression didn't change. "Agent Chen, when I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution, that oath didn't include a clause about protecting criminals who happened to wear the same uniform. When I discovered what was happening, I had 2 choices: be complicit in war crimes or gather evidence to stop them." Chen extended her hand toward the USB drive, then hesitated. "Miss Santos, once I take possession of this evidence, there's no going back. This investigation will take on a life of its own, and everyone involved will be at risk." "Agent Chen, people have already died because of what's on this drive. Civilians in Afghanistan, soldiers who ask too many questions, and probably contractors who became liabilities." Maya placed the drive on the table between them. "The only question now is whether we're going to let the people responsible continue killing to protect their secrets." Chen took the drive, feeling its weight both physically and metaphorically. "Miss Santos, I give you my word that this evidence will be handled properly, and that everyone responsible will be held accountable, regardless of rank or position." "I hope so, Agent Chen, because if this gets buried or suppressed, a lot more people are going to die." Chen's secure phone buzzed with an urgent message. She read it quickly, then looked up at Maya with concern. "Miss Santos, we have a problem. I just received word that Colonel Marcus Webb, Department of Defense Special Projects Division, is en route here with a team from Army CID. He's claiming authority over this case and demanding immediate custody of you and all evidence." Maya's face went pale. "Agent Chen, Marcus Webb is the commanding officer I told you about. He's the one whose files I accessed to gather evidence. He's not coming here to investigate. He's coming here to eliminate the evidence and everyone who's seen it." Chen felt her heart rate spike. If Maya was right, then they had perhaps an hour before Webb arrived with official authority to take control of the situation. "What do you recommend?" Chen asked. Maya's expression was grim but determined. "Agent Chen, it's time to go to war." Colonel Marcus Webb stepped out of the military helicopter at Bakersfield's small regional airport, his dress uniform immaculate, despite the 3-hour flight from Washington, D.C. Behind him, 6 men in civilian clothes emerged from the aircraft, his hand-picked team from the Army's Criminal Investigation Command, each one chosen for their loyalty to him personally, rather than to abstract concepts of justice or accountability. Webb was 52 years old, a career Army officer who had risen through the ranks by understanding that wars were won by men willing to make hard choices. In Afghanistan, those choices had included eliminating threats to operational security, regardless of their nationality or civilian status. They had also included creative interpretations of regulations governing reconstruction contracts and weapons procurement. Maya Santos represented the greatest threat to Webb's career and freedom that he had ever faced. She possessed evidence that could destroy not only him, but dozens of other officers and contractors who had profited from the chaos of war. Allowing her to testify would be tantamount to signing his own death warrant. "Sir," said Captain Reynolds, Webb's aide-de-camp, "local authorities are claiming federal jurisdiction over DeSantis' situation. The FBI has taken control of the investigation and is refusing to cooperate with CID." Webb smiled coldly. He had anticipated this possibility and prepared accordingly. "Captain, contact the Pentagon and inform them that we have a code black situation involving compromised intelligence and potential terrorist infiltration. I want full military authority over this operation within the hour." Code Black was a rarely used provision that allowed military commanders to assume control of civilian law enforcement operations in cases of national security emergencies. It required approval from the Secretary of Defense and notification of the President, but Webb had the necessary connections to expedite the process. "Sir, what about the FBI agents already on scene? They'll be reassigned to support roles. This is now a military operation." Webb checked his watch. "ETA to the Sheriff's Department." 20 minutes by convoy, sir." Webb nodded. 20 minutes to finalize his plans and prepare for what would essentially be a military assault on a civilian law enforcement facility. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was about to commit the very kind of abuse of power that Maya Santos had tried to expose 3 years ago. But Webb had learned long ago that survival sometimes required becoming the monster your enemies claimed you were. His secure phone rang, displaying a number he recognized immediately. "Webb here." "Colonel, this is Director Hayes, Defense Intelligence Agency. I understand you're taking control of the Santos situation." Webb had been expecting this call. Director Hayes had been one of his co-conspirators in the Afghanistan operations, and he had as much to lose as Webb if Maya's evidence became public. "Affirmative, Director. I'm moving to secure the witness and all related evidence within the hour." "Good. But, Colonel, we have a problem. Santos has already shared some of her information with the FBI. Agent Rebecca Chen has copies of at least some of the documents." Webb felt his blood pressure spike. If the evidence was already in FBI hands, then simply eliminating Maya Santos would no longer be sufficient. They would need to discredit the evidence itself and anyone who had seen it. "How do you know this?" Webb asked. "We have assets monitoring FBI communications. Chen transmitted encrypted files to FBI headquarters approximately 30 minutes ago." Hayes paused. "Marcus, we may have reached the point where damage control is no longer possible." Webb considered this. He had built his entire career on the principle that every problem had a solution if you were willing to pay the price for it. The question was whether he was prepared to pay the price this situation demanded. "Director, I need you to activate all of our assets within the Justice Department. FBI, U.S. attorneys, anyone who can influence the handling of this evidence." "That's a significant risk, Marcus. If we expose our network and this still goes public, we'll lose everything." "If we don't act now, we'll lose everything anyway." Webb's voice was steel. "Director, I'm implementing Protocol 7. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Protocol 7 was their code name for the complete elimination of witnesses and evidence, regardless of collateral damage. It was a contingency they had hoped never to use. "Marcus, are you certain? Protocol 7 is irreversible." "Director, Maya Santos has evidence that could send us all to federal prison for the rest of our lives. She's already killed 8 of our contractors and shared intelligence with federal agents. At this point, half measures will only delay the inevitable. Webb ended the call and turned to Captain Reynolds. Captain, I need you to contact Cerberus Solutions and activate a full tactical team. Authorization code is Bravo 7 Alpha. Reynolds looked confused. Sir, Cerberus is a private contractor. We can't authorize them to operate on U.S. soil. Webb's expression was patient but deadly. Captain, Maya Santos has been classified as an enemy combatant who poses an imminent threat to national security. That classification gives us extraordinary authority to neutralize the threat by any means necessary. It was a lie, of course. Maya Santos was a whistleblower, not a terrorist. And Webb had no legal authority to classify her as anything else. But Reynolds was young and idealistic, still believing that his commanding officers operated within the bounds of law and morality. Understood, sir. What are our rules of engagement? Webb considered the question. Once he gave this order, there would be no going back. He would be committing, not just to eliminating Maya Santos, but to a cover-up that would require the deaths of multiple federal agents and civilian law enforcement officers. But the alternative was spending the rest of his life in a federal penitentiary, assuming he lived long enough to reach trial. Webb had made too many enemies over the years to survive in prison. Captain, our primary objective is securing the witness and all evidence. Secondary objective is neutralizing any federal agents who refuse to cooperate with military authority. Tertiary objective is ensuring that no one who has seen the classified material survives to testify about it. Reynolds stared at him with growing horror. Sir, you're talking about killing American law enforcement officers. Webb's voice was calm and reasonable. Captain, I'm talking about protecting national security secrets that could compromise ongoing operations and endanger American lives. Sometimes that requires making difficult choices. He pulled out his sidearm and checked the magazine, his movements casual and practiced. Captain, you have two choices. You can follow orders and help me protect American interests, or you can be classified as a security risk and dealt with accordingly. Reynolds understood the implications immediately. He was being offered a choice between becoming complicit in mass murder or becoming one of the victims. Sir, I'll follow your orders. Webb smiled and holstered his weapon. I knew I could count on you, Captain. Now, let's go remind Maya Santos why she should have stayed hidden. As their convoy moved toward the sheriff's department, Webb felt the familiar calm that settled over him before combat operations. He had commanded men in battle for 25 years, and he understood that victory often went to the side willing to escalate beyond their enemy's expectations. Maya Santos was a dangerous opponent, but she was still thinking like a soldier bound by rules and morality. Webb had abandoned those constraints long ago. This time, he intended to win permanently. Agent Rebecca Chen watched the convoy of black SUVs approaching the sheriff's department through binoculars, counting vehicles and estimating personnel. 8 vehicles, probably 6 to 8 men per vehicle, all moving with military precision and coordination. This wasn't a law enforcement operation. This was an invasion force. Maya, she called into her radio, Colonel Webb is here with approximately 50 men. They're not coming to negotiate. Maya's voice came back immediately, calm and controlled. Understood. Agent Chen, you need to get everyone out of the building immediately. Webb isn't going to honor civilian law enforcement authority. Chen had already reached the same conclusion. She'd been monitoring military communications channels and had intercepted several references to Code Black authorization and enemy combatants. Someone very high up in the chain of command had given Webb extraordinary authority, and he intended to use it. All units. This is Agent Chen, she announced over the radio. We have incoming military forces with unknown intentions. I'm ordering immediate evacuation of all civilian personnel and witnesses to secure locations. Detective Martinez's voice crackled through the radio. Agent Chen, where exactly do you suggest we go? They've got the building surrounded. It was a good question. Chen had anticipated the possibility of another assault, but she hadn't expected it to come with official military authorization. Her backup plan had assumed they would be dealing with more private contractors, not a full military operation. Maya, Chen said into her radio, I need options. We've got 50-plus hostiles with military authority and nowhere to run. Maya's response was immediate. Agent Chen, I'm going to give you GPS coordinates for a location approximately 15 miles north of here. It's an abandoned mining facility with defensible positions and multiple escape routes. Can you get everyone there? Chen plotted the coordinates on her map. The location was remote and isolated, which could work in their favor if they could reach it without being followed. But it also meant they would be cut off from backup and support. Maya, how do you know about this location? It's a fallback position I established when I first came to Bakersfield. I've spent the last 3 years preparing for this exact scenario. Maya's voice carried the weight of someone who had been planning for war. Agent Chen, you have maybe 5 minutes before Webb's forces breach the building. You need to move now. Chen made the hardest decision of her career. All units, we're evacuating immediately. Transport all witnesses and evidence to the coordinates Maya is providing. Move fast and stay quiet. As the FBI team began their emergency evacuation, Chen couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap of Webb's making. But Maya Santos had proven herself twice now, and Chen was betting her life, and the lives of everyone under her protection, that the former ranger knew what she was doing. The convoy of military vehicles had stopped just outside the sheriff's department perimeter. Through her binoculars, Chen could see Webb himself stepping out of the lead vehicle, his uniform crisp and his bearing confident. He was a man accustomed to command, someone who expected his orders to be followed without question. Chen watched as Webb approached the perimeter, flanked by 6 armed men in tactical gear. Detective Martinez met them at the tape, her posture tense but professional. Detective Martinez, Webb said, his voice carrying easily across the parking lot. I'm Colonel Marcus Webb, United States Army. I'm here to take custody of Maya Santos and all evidence related to her case. Martinez held up a document. Colonel, I have a federal court order placing Ms. Santos under FBI protection. She's a federal witness in an ongoing investigation. Webb barely glanced at the paperwork. Detective, I have authorization from the Secretary of Defense that supersedes any civilian court order. Ms. Santos is wanted for questioning regarding classified material that poses a threat to national security. Chen could see the standoff developing. Martinez was legally in the right, but Webb had the authority and firepower to override legal niceties. In a contest between federal law and military authority, the outcome usually depended on who was willing to escalate further. Chen keyed her radio to Maya's frequency. Maya, they're stalling at the perimeter, but not for long. How much time do you need? Quote, 2 more minutes to finish uploading files to my backup servers, then we can move. Chen felt a chill. Maya, what files? Insurance, Agent Chen. Complete copies of everything on that flash drive, plus video footage of today's events, all being transmitted to multiple secure servers, with instructions for automatic release, if I don't check in every 12 hours. Chen realized that Maya had been playing a much longer game than any of them had understood. She wasn't just trying to survive, she was ensuring that the truth would come out regardless of what happened to her personally. Through her binoculars, Chen saw Webb losing patience with the legal niceties. He gestured to his men, and they began moving into tactical positions around the building. This was about to become a military assault on American law enforcement. All units, we are out of time, Chen announced. Execute emergency evacuation immediately. The FBI team moved with practiced efficiency, shepherding witnesses toward the back exit, while Chen maintained overwatch. Mrs. Henderson was helped into a vehicle by Agent Park, while Tommy Morrison and Rodriguez the cook were loaded into a second SUV. The evidence and documentation were secured in a third vehicle. Chen was about to follow when her radio crackled with Webb's voice, somehow having accessed their frequency. Agent Chen, this is Colonel Webb. I know you're listening. Maya Santos is a traitor who stole classified material and has been evading military justice for 3 years. By harboring her, you and your team are now accomplices to treason. Chen keyed her radio. Colonel Webb, Maya Santos is a federal witness under FBI protection. Any attempt to interfere with our investigation will be considered obstruction of justice. Webb's laughter was cold and humorless. Agent Chen, I have authorization to classify this entire situation as a matter of national security. Your investigation has been terminated, and your authority has been revoked. Surrender Maya Santos immediately, and no charges will be filed against you or your team. Chen felt her blood boil. Webb was essentially conducting a military coup against civilian law enforcement, using national security as justification for what amounted to a cover-up of his own crimes. Colonel Webb, I respectfully decline your offer. Maya Santos remains under FBI protection until this matter is resolved through proper legal channels. Quote, Agent Chen, you have 60 seconds to reconsider your position. After that, I'll be forced to take more direct action. Chen looked out at Webb's forces and estimated their chances of fighting their way out. With 50 military contractors against 6 FBI agents and a handful of local cops, the odds were overwhelmingly against them. But Maya had given them an advantage Webb didn't know about, a defensible position where they could make a stand. Maya, Chen said into her radio, please tell me this mining facility of yours has some tactical advantages. Maya's voice was grim but confident. Agent Chen, I've spent 3 years turning that place into a fortress. Webb may have superior numbers, but we'll have superior positioning and preparation. Chen made her decision. All units, final evacuation now. We're going to make our stand at Maya's location. As the FBI convoy pulled away from the sheriff's department, Chen saw Webb's forces beginning their assault on the empty building. By the time they realized their targets had escaped, Chen hoped they would be safely entrenched in Maya's chosen battleground. But she also knew that this was far from over. Webb had the resources to track them down, and he'd proven that he was willing to use any amount of force to achieve his objectives. The question was whether Maya Santos's 3 years of preparation would be enough to stop a man who had spent 25 years learning how to win wars by any means necessary. The abandoned copper mine known as Devil's Canyon had been worked out and abandoned in the 1980s, leaving behind a complex of tunnels, processing buildings, and administrative structures scattered across 50 acres of desert landscape. To most people, it looked like just another industrial ruin slowly being reclaimed by the wilderness. To Maya Santos, it was the perfect fortress. She had spent the better part of 3 years slowly and carefully preparing Devil's Canyon for exactly this scenario. Emergency supplies, weapons caches, communication equipment, defensive positions, everything needed to hold off a superior force while backup arrived or evidence was disseminated. Agent Chen followed Maya through the main entrance, a reinforced steel door that looked original but had been upgraded with electronic locks and surveillance systems. Inside, the building was a mixture of industrial decay and military preparation. Maya, this is incredible, Chen said, looking around at the organized storage areas, communications center, and tactical planning room. How long have you been preparing this place? I started working on it 6 months after I arrived in Bakersfield, Maya replied, checking monitors that showed feeds from hidden cameras positioned around the perimeter. I knew eventually they would find me, and I wanted to be ready. Agent Park was setting up a communications array while Agent Walsh secured the evidence files they brought from the sheriff's department. Agent Torres was positioning the civilian witnesses in what appeared to be a reinforced bunker area with its own air filtration and emergency supplies. Maya, Mrs. Henderson called from the bunker area, "Dear, I have to ask, what exactly did you do in the army?" Maya paused in her weapons check to look at the elderly woman who had served her coffee and pie for 3 years. Mrs. Henderson, I was part of a special operations unit that conducted classified missions behind enemy lines. We were trained to operate independently with minimal support for extended periods. Tommy Morrison whistled appreciatively. No wonder you turned that diner into a war zone. But Maya, why didn't you ever tell us any of this? Because I was trying to leave that life behind, Maya said quietly. I thought I could just be Maya the waitress and forget about Staff Sergeant Santos. I was wrong. Chen was studying the tactical displays Maya had set up, showing approaches to the facility and defensive fields of fire. Maya, this is military-grade preparation. Where did you get the equipment? Some of it I purchased legally, some of it I acquired from surplus sales and private collectors. Maya's expression was carefully neutral. Agent Chen, when you're preparing to fight people with unlimited resources, you have to be creative about leveling the playing field. Chen decided not to ask for details about the acquired equipment. At this point, their survival depended on Maya's preparations, and legal niceties were secondary to staying alive. How long can we hold this position? Chen asked. Maya considered the question, running through tactical scenarios in her mind. Against conventional assault, indefinitely. I have enough supplies for 2 weeks, multiple escape routes, and defensive positions that would require significant casualties to overcome. She paused. But if Webb brings heavy equipment or decides to use airstrikes, we'd have maybe an hour. Would he really authorize airstrikes on American soil? Maya's expression was grim. Agent Chen, Webb has already assaulted a police station, and is conducting an illegal military operation against civilian law enforcement. At this point, I don't think there's anything he wouldn't do to protect himself. Agent Torres approached from the bunker area. Maya, the civilians are secure, but they're asking questions about what happens next. What do I tell them? Maya looked at the tactical displays, considering their options. Webb's forces would be tracking them, probably using satellite surveillance and electronic intercepts. They had maybe 30 minutes before the assault began. Tell them the truth, Maya said. We're going to hold this position until backup arrives, or until we can get the evidence into the right hands. Either way, this ends today. Chen's secure phone buzzed with an incoming call. The caller ID showed Deputy Director Webb, Marcus Webb, not the Marcus Webb from the FBI. Agent Chen, you and your team have 60 seconds to surrender Maya Santos and all evidence in your possession. After that, I'll be forced to authorize a full military assault on your position. Chen looked at Maya, who nodded grimly. Colonel Webb, this is Agent Chen. I'm declaring this a federal crime scene under FBI jurisdiction. Any military assault on this position will be considered an act of treason against the United States government. Webb's laughter was cold. Agent Chen, I'm operating under direct authorization from the Secretary of Defense. Your jurisdiction has been revoked, and you are now in violation of federal law. Surrender immediately, and no charges will be filed. Chen felt the weight of the moment. She was a career FBI agent who had always operated within the system, always followed proper procedures, and respected chain of command. But she was also looking at evidence of systematic corruption that reached the highest levels of the military, and she was faced with a choice between following illegal orders and protecting witnesses who were telling the truth. Colonel Webb, I respectfully decline. Maya Santos and the other witnesses remain under federal protection. Then you've chosen your side, Agent Chen. I hope you're prepared for the consequences. The line went dead. Maya was already moving, activating defensive systems and checking weapon placements. Agent Chen, Webb is going to try to overwhelm us with superior firepower. Our advantage is that he wants the evidence and witnesses intact, which limits his tactical options. Chen watched Maya's preparations with growing admiration. 3 years ago, this woman had been a soldier following orders. Today, she was a strategist preparing to take on the entire military-industrial complex that had tried to silence her. Maya, what are our chances? Maya looked up from her weapons check, her expression calm and determined. Agent Chen, I've been preparing for this fight for 3 years. I know every inch of this facility, every defensive position, every escape route. Webb may have superior numbers and equipment, but this is my ground. She moved to the communications array and began broadcasting on multiple frequencies. This is Staff Sergeant Maya Santos, United States Army Rangers, serial number 123456789. I am currently under siege by illegal military forces attempting to silence evidence of war crimes and corruption. I am transmitting complete evidence files to media outlets, congressional offices, and international human rights organizations. If anything happens to me or the witnesses under my protection, this information will be automatically released. Maya looked directly at Chen. Agent Chen, I've been running from this fight for 3 years, but I'm not running anymore. In the distance, they could hear the sound of approaching helicopters. Webb's assault was about to begin, and Maya Santos was finally ready to make her stand. The first wave came from the north, just as Maya had predicted, 6 men in full tactical gear, approaching under cover of the abandoned processing equipment. Maya watched them through her scope from the elevated position she'd chosen in the main administrative building, counting their movements and evaluating their skill level. Professional contractors, she murmured into her radio, moving in standard assault formation. They're good, but they're not rangers. Agent Chen was positioned in the communications center, monitoring multiple frequencies and coordinating with the FBI team. Maya, I've got helicopter signatures approaching from the south. Looks like Webb is conducting a pincer movement. Maya smiled grimly. Webb was using conventional military tactics against an unconventional opponent. He was thinking like a colonel commanding regular forces, not like someone fighting a guerrilla war against a prepared defender. Agent Chen, tell your team to hold position and wait for my signal. We're going to let them commit to their assault before we reveal our full defensive capabilities. The first shots came at 1432, automatic weapons fire that shattered windows and sent concrete chips flying from the building's exterior. Maya didn't return fire immediately. Instead, she watched and waited, allowing Webb's forces to reveal their positions and capabilities. Through her scope, she could see the assault team moving with professional competence, but limited imagination. They were following textbook procedures for building clearance, which meant they were predictable. Maya had spent 3 years studying those same textbooks and designing counters for every standard tactic. "Contact north," she announced into her radio. 6 hostiles advancing on the main building. Automatic weapons, flashbang grenades, standard entry equipment. Agent Park's voice crackled through the radio. "Maya, I've got visual on the helicopters. 2 birds, probably carrying another 12 men. They're setting up for fast rope insertion on the south side." Maya had expected as much. Webb was committed to overwhelming force, trying to end the engagement quickly before it could attract unwanted attention. But he was also underestimating both Maya's preparations and her willingness to escalate. "All units, weapons free," Maya announced. "Engage targets of opportunity but maintain defensive positions. Do not pursue beyond the perimeter." Maya's first shot took out the lead assault team member at 300 yards, a clean headshot that dropped him instantly. Her second shot shattered the knee of the man behind him, sending him screaming to the ground. The remaining 4 members of the assault team dove for cover, their advance grinding to a halt. But Maya was already moving, using the tunnel system she'd spent months preparing to relocate to a different firing position. By the time Webb's forces had identified her original location, she was gone. Agent Walsh engaged the helicopter insertion team from her position in the processing building, her FBI training serving her well in the confined spaces and limited sightlines. 2 contractors went down in the first exchange, while the others were forced to take cover behind inadequate industrial equipment. "This is Colonel Webb," came the voice over the radio frequencies Maya was monitoring. "All units, the targets are more heavily armed and prepared than anticipated. Authorize use of explosive devices and heavy weapons." Maya felt a chill. Webb was escalating beyond what she'd planned for, moving into territory that would result in significant casualties on both sides. "Agent Chen," Maya called into her radio, "Webb is authorizing explosives. We need to activate the contingency plan." Chen's voice was tense but controlled. "Maya, what contingency plan?" "The one where we stop playing defense and start playing offense." Maya was already moving toward the weapons cache she'd hidden in the mine's lower levels. "Agent Chen, I need you to maintain communications with the outside world. Make sure everyone knows what's happening here." Maya reached the cache and began arming herself with equipment she'd hoped never to use. Explosive charges, automatic weapons, specialized ammunition designed to penetrate body armor. She was transforming from a defensive fighter into an active threat. "Maya," Mrs. Henderson's voice came through the intercom system. "Dear, are you all right?" Maya paused in her preparations. Mrs. Henderson had been serving coffee and asking about her day for 3 years, treating her like the granddaughter she'd never had. The idea of that kind woman being caught in a military assault was unacceptable. "Mrs. Henderson, I need you to stay in the bunker with Tommy and Rodriguez. Agent Torres will keep you safe." "But Mrs. Henderson, if something happens to me, I need you to tell people what really happened here." "Nothing's going to happen to you, dear. You're the strongest person I've ever met." Maya felt tears threaten at the corners of her eyes. Mrs. Henderson still saw her as Maya the waitress, not Staff Sergeant Santos. But Maya knew that the waitress was gone forever, consumed by the necessities of war. An explosion rocked the building, sending dust and debris cascading from the ceiling. Webb's forces had breached the outer perimeter and were beginning their assault on the main defensive positions. Maya emerged from the cache carrying enough firepower to outfit a small squad. She was no longer thinking like someone trying to survive. She was thinking like someone preparing to win at any cost. "Agent Chen, I'm going active. Maintain defensive positions and protect the witnesses. I'm going to remind Colonel Webb why Rangers have a reputation." Maya moved through the tunnel system with deadly purpose, emerging behind Webb's forward positions like a ghost materialized from the desert itself. The first contractor never saw her coming. The second managed to turn before Maya's knife found his throat. She was systematically destroying Webb's assault force from behind, using every technique she'd learned in 8 years of special operations. This wasn't the clinical efficiency she'd displayed at the diner. This was total war. Her radio crackled with Webb's increasingly frustrated commands. All units, we have an active hostile moving through our rear positions. Shift to defensive posture and establish overwatch. Maya smiled grimly. Webb was learning that overwhelming force meant nothing if you couldn't bring it to bear effectively. She had turned his assault into a hunting expedition, with herself as the hunter and his contractors as prey. But she also knew that Webb's patience had limits. Eventually he would decide that capturing her alive was less important than eliminating the threat she represented. When that happened, he would authorize tactics that would put everyone at risk. Maya reached her final position, an elevated platform that gave her overwatch of Webb's command post. Through her scope, she could see the colonel himself, standing behind an armored vehicle and directing his forces with professional competence. Maya had a clear shot. One bullet would end the threat to herself and everyone under her protection. But it would also make her a cop killer, someone who had murdered an American military officer on American soil. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, torn between the soldier's duty to eliminate threats and the citizen's obligation to respect law and order. That fraction of a second saved Webb's life and changed the course of the battle. A sniper's bullet shattered the concrete inches from Maya's head, forcing her to take cover. Webb had positioned overwatch of his own, and Maya had just learned that she wasn't the only professional on the battlefield. "Agent Chen," Maya called into her radio, her voice tight with adrenaline. "We have a problem. Webb brought a sniper, and he's good enough to pin me down." Chen's voice was grim. "Maya, we've got bigger problems. I just intercepted communications indicating that Webb has called for air support. We've got inbound attack helicopters, ETA 10 minutes. Maya felt her blood run cold. Attack helicopters would end the engagement decisively, regardless of her preparations or tactical advantages. Webb had decided that destroying the evidence, and everyone who had seen it, was more important than maintaining any pretense of legality. "Agent Chen, execute emergency evacuation, get everyone into the tunnels, and prepare to move to the secondary position." "Maya, what about you?" Maya looked through her scope at Webb's command position, calculating angles and distances. She had one chance to end this before the helicopters arrived, but it would require exposing herself to sniper fire and close-range assault. "Agent Chen, get everyone to safety. I'm going to buy you the time you need." Maya Santos had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. Now it was time to discover whether her preparations were enough to stop a man willing to murder anyone who threatened his secrets. The sound of approaching helicopters grew louder, and Maya realized that the next few minutes would determine whether justice prevailed or whether truth died in the desert, alongside everyone who had tried to protect it. The AH-64 Apache helicopters appeared as dark silhouettes against the afternoon sky, their rotors creating dust devils that obscured the ground below. Maya watched them through her scope, counting weapons systems and calculating response times. 2 gunships, fully armed, approaching with the kind of deliberate menace that spoke of pilots who had authorization to use lethal force. "Agent Chen," Maya spoke into her radio while maintaining visual contact with Webb's sniper. "Those are attack helicopters, not transport. Webb has authorization to level this entire facility." Chen's voice crackled back, tight with stress. "Maya, we're moving the witnesses into the deep tunnels, but we need more time. Can you keep those helicopters occupied?" Maya almost laughed. Chen was asking her to engage military attack helicopters with small arms, the kind of impossible mission that Rangers specialized in. "Agent Chen, I can buy you maybe 5 minutes. After that, you need to be ready to move to the secondary extraction point." Maya had prepared for this contingency, though she'd hoped never to use it. Hidden throughout the facility were shoulder-fired missiles, acquired through channels she preferred not to think about too carefully. They would give her a chance against the helicopters, but using them would also escalate the situation beyond any possibility of peaceful resolution. She moved through the tunnel system toward the first missile cache, her movements swift and silent, despite the chaos erupting above ground. Webb's ground forces were still trying to locate her, hampered by the maze of industrial equipment and defensive positions she'd prepared. The sniper was good. Maya caught glimpses of muzzle flashes from his position, each shot precisely aimed at locations where she'd been moments before. But he was thinking like a conventional marksman, not like someone fighting an opponent who had spent 3 years preparing the battlefield. Maya emerged from a ventilation shaft behind the sniper's position, moving with the fluid grace of a predator closing on prey. He was positioned on a water tower, approximately 200 yards from the main building, with an excellent view of the facility's approaches. Excellent, but not perfect. Maya's knife found its mark before the sniper realized he was no longer the hunter. She relieved him of his rifle and radio, then paused to assess the tactical situation from his elevated position. Webb's forces were in disarray. Half his assault team was down, the remainder scattered and taking defensive positions. The colonel himself was standing behind his command vehicle, speaking animatedly into a radio, probably coordinating with the helicopter pilots. The Apaches were circling the facility, their pilots scanning for targets and threats. Maya could see the door gunners tracking movement below, fingers on triggers, waiting for authorization to engage. Maya reached the first missile cache and armed the shoulder-fired system, a military-grade weapon that would give her exactly one chance against each helicopter. She'd studied the technical specifications extensively, one shot, one kill, if she could achieve target lock. The first Apache was approaching from the east, flying low and fast in an attack profile that would bring its main gun to bear on the administrative building where Agent Chen was coordinating the evacuation. Maya emerged from cover and acquired target lock, the missile seeker head tracking the helicopter's heat signature. She had perhaps 3 seconds before the Apache's defensive systems detected the threat and began evasive maneuvers. Maya fired. The missile streaked across the desert sky, its contrail marking a deadly arc toward the Apache. The pilot saw it coming and attempted to evade, deploying chaff and flares while pulling into a sharp climbing turn. Almost enough. The missile detonated 20 feet from the helicopter's tail rotor, the explosion sending shrapnel through critical systems and causing catastrophic mechanical failure. Maya watched the Apache spin out of control and crash into the desert floor, its fuel tanks exploding in a fireball that could be seen for miles. The second Apache immediately began evasive maneuvers, its pilot scanning for the source of the missile attack. Maya was already moving, using the industrial maze to break line of sight while she repositioned for another shot. Webb's voice echoed across the facility through loudspeakers mounted on his command vehicle. "Maya Santos, this is Colonel Webb. You have just attacked United States military aircraft, an act of treason punishable by death. Surrender immediately, and the civilians under your protection will not be harmed." Maya keyed the radio frequency Webb was using. "Colonel Webb, this is Staff Sergeant Santos. You have just conducted an illegal military assault on American civilians. I'm defending myself and federal witnesses against an unlawful attack. Staff Sergeant, you are in violation of direct orders from superior officers. Stand down immediately." Maya's response was cold and precise. "Colonel, I don't take orders from war criminals." The second Apache was approaching from the south, its pilot having learned from his wingman's fate. He was flying higher and faster, using terrain masking to limit Maya's engagement opportunities. Maya reached the second missile cache but realized she wouldn't have a clear shot from this position. The helicopter was staying beyond the missile's effective range, positioning itself to use its main gun against the building where the witnesses were sheltered. She made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life, however long that might be. Maya activated the emergency beacon she'd hidden in the facility's communications center, a device that would broadcast her location and situation to every law enforcement and military unit within 200 miles. She was calling for help, but she was also exposing everyone's position to any hostile forces that might be monitoring. All stations, this is Staff Sergeant Maya Santos, U.S. Army Rangers. I am under illegal military assault by forces commanded by Colonel Marcus Webb. Federal witnesses are in immediate danger from attack helicopters. Request immediate assistance from any loyal American forces." Quote, "The response was immediate and overwhelming. Multiple agencies began responding: FBI, DEA, California National Guard, even local sheriff's departments from 3 counties. Maya had just turned a covert operation into a public spectacle that would be impossible to cover up or deny. Webb realized this immediately. His voice came over the radio, no longer attempting to maintain any pretense of authority. "Santos, you have just signed your own death warrant. I don't care how many agencies respond. You'll be dead before they arrive." The second Apache was positioning for its attack run, main gun targeting the building where Agent Chen was coordinating the evacuation. Maya could see the pilot's intention. He was going to level the entire structure, killing everyone inside. Maya emerged from cover and fired her second missile, knowing that she was exposing herself to ground fire from Webb's remaining forces. The missile tracked true, but the Apache pilot was ready this time, deploying countermeasures and pulling into a violent, evasive maneuver. The missile missed by 50 feet, its proximity fuse failing to detonate. Maya was completely exposed, standing in the middle of the facility with no cover and no more anti-aircraft weapons. Webb's ground forces had clear shots at her from multiple positions. But instead of firing, they hesitated, some indefinable quality in Maya's bearing. The calm acceptance of someone who had made peace with death gave them pause. The Apache completed its evasive maneuver and came around for its attack run, main gun trained on Maya's position. She could see the pilot's face through the cockpit glass, professional and impersonal, preparing to kill an American soldier on American soil. Maya keyed her radio one final time. "Agent Chen, get everyone out. This ends here." The Apache's main gun opened fire, 30mm rounds chewing up the ground around Maya's position. She dove for the minimal cover of a concrete barrier, knowing that it wouldn't stop armor-piercing rounds, but hoping it might deflect them enough to keep her alive for another few seconds. The rounds walked across the facility, each impact sending up clouds of concrete dust and metal fragments. Maya could hear them getting closer, feel the impacts vibrating through the ground. Then, suddenly, the firing stopped. Maya looked up to see the Apache pulling away, its pilot speaking rapidly into his radio. In the distance, she could see other aircraft approaching military helicopters, but flying in formation and displaying proper identification markings. "Maya Santos, this is General Patricia Morrison, California National Guard. You are ordered to cease all hostile action and prepare to receive military assistance." Maya felt her knees go weak with relief. General Morrison was a name she recognized from her Rangers service, a straight-arrow officer with an impeccable reputation who commanded respect throughout the military hierarchy. "General Morrison, this is Staff Sergeant Santos. I am defending federal witnesses against illegal military assault by forces commanded by Colonel Marcus Webb. Request immediate assistance." "Staff Sergeant, we have been monitoring the situation. Colonel Webb's authorization has been revoked, and he is ordered to stand down immediately." Webb's voice came over the radio, desperate now. "General Morrison, Maya Santos is a traitor who has stolen classified material. She must be taken into custody immediately." Morrison's response was crisp and professional. "Colonel Webb, you are relieved of command and ordered to surrender yourself and your forces to National Guard custody. Any further military action will be considered mutiny." Maya watched as the second Apache landed, its pilot apparently deciding that following illegal orders was less appealing than facing a court-martial. Webb's ground forces began laying down their weapons, recognizing that the situation had changed fundamentally. But Webb himself was not finished. Maya could see him moving toward his command vehicle, his movements suggesting desperation rather than surrender. "Agent Chen," Maya called into her radio, "keep everyone in the tunnels. Webb isn't going to surrender quietly." Webb's voice came over the loudspeakers one final time, no longer the controlled tone of a military officer, but the desperate snarl of a cornered animal. "If I can't silence you, Santos, then I'll make sure you die with the truth." Maya saw Webb pull something from his command vehicle, a device that looked like a radio detonator. She realized with horror that he had rigged the facility with explosives, probably as a final contingency if his operation failed. Webb was going to kill everyone, witnesses, federal agents, his own men, rather than face justice for his crimes. Maya began running toward Webb's position, knowing she had perhaps 10 seconds before he completed the detonation sequence. 10 seconds to cross 200 yards of open ground while under fire from a desperate man with nothing left to lose. It was the kind of impossible mission that had defined her military career. The question was whether she could complete one more. Maya sprinted across the open ground between her position and Webb's command vehicle, every instinct screaming that she was running into a killing field. Webb saw her coming and raised his sidearm, his face twisted with the desperate fury of a man who had lost everything. The first shot went wide, adrenaline affecting Webb's normally steady marksmanship. Maya jinked left, using the sparse cover of abandoned equipment to break his sightline. The second shot struck a metal beam inches from her head, sending sparks into the desert air. 10 seconds, Santos! Webb shouted, holding up the detonator with his free hand. 10 seconds and everyone dies with your precious truth! Maya could see the device in his hand, military grade, probably wired to charges placed throughout the facility. Webb had been planning this contingency from the beginning, preparing to eliminate all evidence and witnesses if his operation failed. She was 50 yards away when Webb fired his third shot, this one catching her in the left shoulder and spinning her around. Maya felt the impact like a sledgehammer blow, but her momentum carried her forward into a roll that brought her back to her feet. 40 yards. Webb was counting down now, his voice echoing across the facility. 5, 4, 3. Maya launched herself through the air in a diving tackle that caught Webb around the waist, sending both of them crashing to the ground beside the command vehicle. The detonator flew from his grasp, skittering across the desert hardpan. Webb was stronger than Maya had expected, his desperation giving him abnormal strength. They rolled across the ground in a vicious fight that had nothing to do with military training and everything to do with survival. Webb's hands found Maya's throat, his fingers tightening with deadly intent. Maya drove her knee into Webb's solar plexus, breaking his grip and creating enough space to strike his temple with her elbow. Webb's eyes rolled back and his body went limp, unconscious from the precisely applied blow. Maya rolled away from him and spotted the detonator lying 10 feet away. She could see the LED display counting down. 8 seconds, 7 seconds, 6 seconds. Maya dove for the device, her wounded shoulder screaming in protest. Her fingers closed around the detonator with 3 seconds remaining. She found the abort sequence Webb had mentioned during his countdown and entered it with 1 second to spare. The countdown stopped at 0:01. Maya collapsed onto her back, staring up at the desert sky while her body processed the adrenaline and shock of the past few minutes. She could hear helicopters landing, voices shouting orders, the organized chaos of a military operation winding down. "Maya!" Agent Chen's voice cut through the noise. "Maya, are you all right?" Maya sat up slowly, assessing her injuries. The bullet wound in her shoulder was bleeding but not life-threatening. Various cuts and bruises from her fight with Webb would heal. Most importantly, she was alive, and so was everyone else. "I'm okay, Agent Chen. Webb is unconscious but breathing. The explosive charges have been disarmed." General Morrison approached with a small security detail, her expression mixing relief with professional concern. "Staff Sergeant Santos, you've had quite a day." Maya struggled to her feet, automatically coming to attention despite her civilian clothes and obvious injuries. "General Morrison, thank you for responding. Without your intervention, this situation would have ended very differently." Morrison gestured for Maya to relax. "Staff Sergeant, based on preliminary reports, it appears you've been defending federal witnesses against an illegal military operation. Is that accurate?" Maya nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Colonel Webb has been attempting to silence evidence of war crimes and corruption that I discovered during my final deployment in Afghanistan." Morrison's expression hardened. "Staff Sergeant, those are serious allegations. Are you prepared to substantiate them with evidence?" Maya looked toward the facility where Agent Chen was coordinating the evacuation of witnesses and evidence. Mrs. Henderson emerged from the tunnels, her face pale but determined. Tommy Morrison and Rodriguez the cook followed, both looking like men who had seen more excitement than they'd bargained for.